Okay, it looks like we're live today. I'm going to send the link to the patrons, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Hey, Mizco, how you doing? I'm going to try and pull up the list of things that have changed since the last release. Or since the last test build, sorry. Okay. Looks like we got a few more people hopping in. Just going to hang around and wait for a few more folks to show up. It's interesting that this is complaining about that. Let's see if I can still run this code. Looks like my local IntelliJ is a little bit messed up. That is unfortunate. Hey, there's more people. Tigerbird's here. Echo, Echo. Ender's here. Let's see. A few more people coming in. I need to fix my build environment real quick so I can spin this up to 1.3. Actually, what I should be able to do is clean idea. One of the problems, if any of the other mod developers, or oh, is there a really weird echo going on? Let me take a look. Test 1, 2, 3. Hey, wrong weekend. Is there a bad echo going on? I can always stop and restart the stream. Hello, hello. Okay, cool. So yeah, if there's any mod developer or add-on developers watching, there is a problem with older versions of Gradle and newer versions of IntelliJ, where it doesn't actually set up the project correctly. So I've removed all the stuff here. So there's no idea stuff in this directly, so I can do Gradle W in, or idea. I think this is the right one for 112. 112 Forge. So this should spin up, this will create the IntelliJ project, and then I can open it, and it should detect everything correctly. Sorry, I'm just doing some setup as more people hop on the stream. It's interesting that it's re-downloading this. I don't think I changed anything on my end. So it'll be a little bit of a slow start tonight. But the big news since the last stream is a test build has gone out. If you're part of the Immersive Railroading Discord group, you can ask a moderator to add you to the test notifier group, and you'll get automatically notified anytime a new test build is ready to go. So If you're not familiar, patrons get first cut to play with the new features as they're in development, and will get support for those, and have the ability to give earlier feedback and shape the features. But if you're still part of the Discord, once it gets to the point where I'm comfortable supporting the feature set for everybody, I put out a test build that doesn't go on CurseForge, but it is available to download and to play with, and you can then give feedback at that point and start. At that point, it's usually stable enough to, with a backup, run on your personal server or your personal Minecraft instance. It may be a little bit buggier than the standard release, but it will give you access to some of the new features. Tigerbird's asking, why not create a UMC Gradle plugin that uses a non-ancient version of Gradle? The problem is, so much of what Forge does is done via Gradle hacks that I can't realistically do that. What I could potentially do is fork Forge Gradle, which some other people have already done, and update them for older versions of Minecraft. But most people don't go all the way back to 1.7.10. So I'll still be using that. Yeah, it's not ideal. Effectively, what I do is I set up. Let's see. Do I have a? Let's see, I don't. I'm still waiting for this to run, which is running surprisingly slowly. The Computercraft Maven is going very slow today, which is a little bit of a problem. Let me hop over here. So UMC.Gradle is automatically generated based on your Minecraft version. And this is what ties you into any of the other Gradle plugins, which allow you to do all the magical Minecraft obfuscation, deobfuscation stuff. It's not my favorite system, but it's the least amount of work to get something that works this well. Why the heck is this so slow? Like, I'm on gigabit fiber here. This should not be this slow. I guess it's the Computercraft Maven is going very slow. This might actually take 5-10 minutes for me to get that up and running. What I can do in the meantime is talk about what's changed. So if I do a git log, see, the last time we did a stream was, let's see, calendar, I believe was 2 weeks ago. So let's take a look from the beginning of the month. What's come into master? A lot of the work that's been done has been merging all of the stuff that's been in progress together. So we've got global controls. I may have talked about that last time. I don't actually remember. This allows you to, from the locomotive, or actually from any piece of stock, change a given control group across all the others. So let's say you have a button in the cab that would allow you to open all of the doors. So it would have control group door, for example. It's not an ideal situation, and there is an augment to do that on a little bit more of a granular level. But a better example would be pantographs. Usually you want to move like all the pantographs up or down at a given time. You could have a button in the cab, and all of the pantographs would be on the control group pantograph. You hit the button, and all of them raise. You hit the button again, all of them lower. So they're all kept in sync, and the button applies to all of them across the different cars, which is pretty cool. Yep, I added the control sounds. I think I showed that in the last stream, but you can't see it, so there's some YouTube videos that I posted that you can see that in. Some debug stuff. Okay, I do want to go through, while we're waiting for this to run in the background, I do want to go through the control document I wrote up. I spent a lot of time writing up a document that goes over the different control options, and I do have a model which I can show off a lot of those options in. Because I've been getting a lot of questions from modelers on how do I use this stuff, and it's definitely a little bit cryptic. So hopefully this will be a good resource in that sense. So I'm going to keep going up. Non-integer rotation points. I forget which modeler was talking about that, but before the rotations the rotation degrees, it would have to be a number, like an integer number, not a number with a decimal point in it. Mizco, you're on. This was the commit that added the ability to require all of the buttons in the cab in a diesel to be turned on before the engine actually starts up, which is pretty cool. Started adding the immersion config. I've been working with Wrong a little bit on and off, trying to figure out what the right way of setting the different immersion levels are. And I've started playing around with that a little bit. Some fixes, GUI changes. GUI changes are still not fully complete, but they'll keep coming in before the next release. Renaming gauges to match. I don't remember what that one is. So I added throttle brake X. This has confused a few people. So in some European locomotives, you can have a throttle and you can have a brake. And that's fairly standard in the US. And in some cases you have that in Europe as well. But for other locomotives, you have a throttle and a brake on the same lever. So if the throttle goes, if you push it forward, you're increasing the throttle. If you pull it back, you're turning on the brake, which is an interesting design. So I added reasonable support for that. There's also a properties.json or a stock JSON config that allows you to do that with the keybinds as well, and I'll go into that. I did some of the gauge scaling wasn't working for the client dragging, so I went and fixed that. I promise I won't be reading this off too much longer, and I'll hop into the more interesting stuff. Fix some stuff there, fix some stuff. Center the throttle brake like the reverser. One thing that I'm thinking about adding is adding a default position to the controls. So I believe it was Sebastian who was asking me about that, but being able to specify this thing starts in the mid position, or fully on or fully off, would be very useful. So I might do that during the stream today. If I forget, remind me in chat. Fixed it so it runs on the server. Fixed some Blender conflicts. Interior lights port fixed. Okay. So this right here is all a bunch of merging. So I'm taking all the disparate pieces of work that are all kind of self-contained and pulling them into one general area, which is useful. Items. So there was, so this is something that is unrelated to the test builds, but if you had a pack and you had an item from that pack in your inventory and you removed the pack, I would spam the console with messages about it. So that has been removed. I used that for debug a while back and forgot to remove it. Okay, we're at the end of the list. Hopefully that wasn't too boring for you guys. Right, Dark was talking to me about this. The bogies and locomotives on non-standard gauges were not locking to the track correctly. I had made some changes when I rebuilt the model system, and I had messed up how it was moving and rotating the bogies and scaling them. So that has been fixed. This right here is interesting. This is a more technical thing, but this may actually improve compatibility with mods like Vivecraft, which have a deeper GL matrix stack. Long story short, this potentially fixes some compatibility issues with other mods, and at least on my computer, there wasn't any performance impact. On some machines, it may actually improve render speed a little bit. Fixed a bug with models. Detecting model components. And then I added LCG support. This is new. Patrons are aware of this, but for those of you who are watching this after the fact, you can now add LCG to lights. So you could have a button which is on, let's say, control group foo. So that would be whatever light name you have, _CG_foo. And then you would also have on the lights that you want to be the lights that you want to have controlled by that button, you would set that light to LCG foo, which means that, like, if you have so I don't know. I've done a poor job explaining the difference between CG and LCG. LCG is really just a way of tying a light to an existing control group. It's not defining a new control group. It's saying that this thing is dependent on whatever's going on with this other control group. So you could have a lever whose light level doesn't change. So that would just be a CG, and you'd have a light that's turned on and off via LCG. And you can move the lights as well via CG. So CG is movement, LCG is turning on and off the lights based on an existing control group. Hopefully that cleared it up. If it didn't, please mention it in chat. I feel like I need a diagram for some of this stuff. But hopefully there will be enough stock created that I can just point to examples over time. Oh, this is fun. It turns out that I had originally set a limit of 99 controls, 99 wheels, 99 different types of parts. That's not enough anymore. Not just for someone creating a ridiculous model with a couple hundred wheels on it, but a level of immersion that folks have been adding to their models has quickly surpassed any of my expectations, which is fantastic. So I made some changes to the code and actually optimized it so the code loads models faster and supports an unlimited number of these. So you could have, for example, wheel 1 to wheel 9,996, or whatever number you come up with, which is pretty awesome. Or, for example, window or door or widget, because people have been adding so many widgets to do all sorts of ridiculous stuff with models. So they're no longer hamstrung by just the numbers 0 through 99. You can use literally any number, any integer number, which, let me Google that real quick. Max. I think it's 64-bit integer. I mean, at the very least, it's 32-bit integer. So the max 32-bit integer is, drum roll, let's see, it's 1,000 million, 2 trillion. So you can have up to 2 trillion-ish widgets in your model. That'll probably cause other problems in immersive railroading, so I'm not going to recommend that, but having several hundred controls shouldn't be a problem at this point. So modelers are now free to do whatever they want to their heart's content, as long as they keep an eye on that to make sure it's not having a performance impact. Okay, and the last thing that was done, that's weird scrolling, is I added the invert modifier to controls. I haven't actually played with this yet. I wonder if Sebastian has or not. But long story short, this allows you to say, it allows you to invert the value of whatever a control group is. So when you're applying it to the rotation, the translation, you can then invert the value. I don't remember if I added that to light groups as well or not. And my goodness, this is still running. I may not actually be able to open up my development environment during the stream. That is surprising and unfortunate. We'll give it some time. There's other stuff we can look at. There's Blender models. I'm going to pull up Firefox. Actually, let me pull up my other window, Firefox. And let's take a look at... So this is... chat, this is your time to ask questions about this document. Is the Immersive Railroading ircontrols.md. And I had a window here, so I gotta pull it over. Okay. Here we go. This right here is a fairly large document that I need to keep updating, that goes over all of the different new control types that are available with Immersive Railroading, and goes into where we've used them. And I'm also going to... Do I have Blender open? I do have Blender open, so I can point at some of this stuff real time. Though I have made some weird modifications to this model, so... though actually, that's... So the changes I've made to the K4 aren't actually committed. I was just messing around as an example. But they serve as a good reference. Okay. So we've added some new model component types. Here are all the controls. Anytime you see an X, X is whatever that, like 2 billion or 2 trillion. Yeah, so it's, yeah, million. Yeah, right, 1,000 million. Billion. Yes, yeah, Tiger's right. So 2 billion. So you effectively replace the X with whatever number you want. And then we have gauges. And one thing I've done is I've added gauges for all of the different, like throttle reverser, train brake, yada, yada, yada. This is more important when we get into some of the throttle brake stuff. So you might want to have a gauge for the throttle, and you might want to have a gauge for the brake. And to be clear, the independent brake does not yet work. That is something I do want to add to this week, but is not yet implemented. Then we've got our headlights, and this pose right here is either front or back. So you can have a headlight on, for example, if you're on a melee locomotive or a compound locomotive, when the front swings around, the front light would swing with it, for example. Excuse me. So this is where you go to find all the new stuff, rather new model components. Let's see. Yeah, engine start requires all controls to be in the on position, and all the locomotive controls are linked. So throttle 1 is linked to throttle 2, which is linked to throttle 3, which is linked to all the other throttles. Let's see. So translation. So you would set, this is like the type of component, component number, translation, so move this amount in the x-axis. So I don't actually think I have one of those in the K4, but that's the simplest one you can play with. And yeah, and you can have a TL for each axis. You could have TL 0.5x underscore TL negative 0.67y, for example, and then it would move in a horizontal or in a diagonal direction. Scale exists. It's a similar specification. I do have an example which I'll show of that in a little bit. Let me pull up another Blender instance and just dissect some of the changes that I've made to some of these models. BJ, up level. And I believe this is the version. This is not the properly configured version. Hang on a sec. This will be important. Is that still running? Goodness, that is still running. Let's see. It's the right command. Okay. I think then what I do is check out this. And that should be the version that has all the additional controls. New instance Blender. Fingers crossed this is the right one. Yes, this is the right one. So you can see here's a door. Okay, do we have any? I don't think we actually have translations, but we do have scales. Let me switch this over to the visual view. So one of the things that has been added, which it's a hair cumbersome, but makes logical sense, is site classes. So you want some sort of group that starts at 0 and then scales all the way up to here. So scale applies from the center of an object. And this is something that I don't think I've talked about even to the patrons yet. One second. Just having a little bit of water. Okay. So this is a site class. If I wanted to modify the model more, you would actually have a case around it, but I just went with the basics for now. So this is set to translate effectively from this point to the center point over the course of the like 0% to 100% full. And it's also set to scale on a factor of 1 on the y-axis, which is the up and down axis. So as it scales up in size, it also moves up. It's a little bit of a weird setup, but what you want is it to move down to here and scale down to 0 as it empties. And when it increases, you want it to move up to the center and scale to fill the whole range. It's a little bit of an odd concept, but it really just have to move it to the halfway down point and set the translate to halfway back up for a side class. Again, it's a little bit funky, but as long as you remember that simple rule, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, that's probably the most extreme example. A more standard example, and my brother just taught me how to use Blender correctly, so I can zoom in on pieces better. This is a good example of setting up a clean and clear rotation. So this right here is reverser 1, rotation -720, and then mesh 008 doesn't, that's just ignored. And this is reverser 1. So this is the main reverser component, but this is the rotation axis. And the way that it determines the actual axis is it takes the point cloud that makes up this particular part of the object that has the ROT under it and draws a normal along those points. It's a little bit of a weird setup, and it took a while to optimize, but it works surprisingly well, and this is what allows you to have controls that are no longer locked to X, Y, or Z axes, which for gauges are very important. I'm going to scroll back out a little bit. Here is another example. We've got widget 1, rotation -90. So this defines the rotation axis and how much to rotate, and this is the actual piece that rotates. And technically both of them rotate together, but this is like this is the main widget. And we've got Firebox, great mesh. And this is one of the things that's in the document is Blender, when it exports, adds an underscore instead of a space. So the correct thing here would to be this caret character. I think there's other names for it in other countries, but I call it a caret. So this Immersive Railroad will replace any of those with a space. So if you have spaces in your stuff and you want the label to show up in-game correctly, that's what's recommended. Another example is this is the so this right here is the throttle rotation point. So this is like the pin that goes through. Yeah, Sebastian. Circumflex. So Sebastian says it's called a circumflex. Flexi? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's a wonderful word, and I wish I could pronounce it correctly. So again, you define the rotation axis, and then the lever in which that rotates, or the component that rotates, which I think is a pretty cool system. Linkages are not yet supported, so you couldn't have like a linkage connected to a linkage connected to a linkage. It's actually a fairly complex math problem. If you want to look it up or want to help me figure out the math, feel free to hit me up in Discord. The keywords are... Actually, let me pull this up just to show you the ridiculousness of this. I should have the Wikipedia page open. So it's called a geometric constraint solver. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but this is something that I've wanted to do, but like this is a whole other language. This is way beyond anything that I understand. To do an arbitrary geometric constraint system. At the end of the day, I think I still have this open and can show it. Where is FreeCAD? Yes. This is what I would like to do, but the math behind this is so freaking complex that I haven't been able to really get started on it. But you define constraints and rotation points, and this thing is locked to an axis. And you could do this all in the model, but the actual math behind this and doing it fast enough to do it on a frame-by-frame basis is a remarkably hard math problem with arbitrary constraints. I'll be working on this on and off over the next year or so, but don't expect this to happen anytime soon. To be clear, don't expect this to happen anytime soon because math. Math that's much harder than I'm familiar with. Yeah, Andrew Boot, yay math. This makes all the other math and like all the other physics look remarkably simple. It's a fun problem, and it's one that I want to play with, but I don't, unless someone wants to come in and build a geometric constraint solver, for me, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. If someone's willing to put in the time and effort, I am more than happy to try and get that in and help them optimize it to run on a frame-by-frame basis, but goodness, it's hard. Anyways, back to this. So that's why we don't have linkages. If anyone asks, that's why we don't have complex linkages. You can fake it in a couple different ways, but yeah, it's why the wall sharets and the other valve views are relatively hard-coded at this point. So, yeah, rotation axis, rotation object. Pretty straightforward. And let's, since we're in here, take a look at some of these gauges. I'm skipping a little bit ahead in the document, but fundamentally, the logic for interactable controls is the same for the gauges. And the gauges, like this is like gauge speed, which is the type, and then 1 is the number, and this is what you do with it. You rotate negative 200. So for example, the maximum speed of this locomotive is 200, and the angle between 0 and 120-ish is about 200 degrees. So that's where I get the negative 200 from. Tigerbird, excellent question. There isn't an open source geometric constraint solving library out there. I wasn't able to find one that works in Java. The only one I found was a hacked together research paper that compiled in Java like 1.3. So it's not great. I did look up the source code of FreeCAD because I was curious. FreeCAD solver is not fast enough, but I could potentially optimize it. But it's a really, 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 really hard problem. Again, if someone wanted to take FreeCAD's algorithms and port them to Java, I would consider pulling that into immersive railroading if we could get it running fast enough. It's something I would love to do, but it is so much bigger than any other mountain I've ever climbed, math or programming wise, that it's huge. Anyways, back to gauges. So these follow the same logic as the controls, like doing the rotation pin thing. So this is a good way of kind of showcasing this is the pin, this is the object that rotates around the pin. And because I know that the max speed is 120, I mean, yes, for those of you playing along at home, this measures bar, which is pressure. But I didn't want to drastically modify the models. So this is what I had to work with. So I set this to a speed. I pretend that this is a speed gauge, 120 being roughly the max speed. So about 200 degrees between 0 and 120 is what gives me this here, this 200 here. So Tigerbird has an interesting question, interfacing with JNI, which I forget the acronym for, but it's interfacing with non-Java code to do geometric constraint solvers. If someone wants to come to me with a prototype with that, I'm all ears for trying to get this sort of thing in. The thing to remember is at 60 frames a second, that gives you about 16 milliseconds per frame. And if you have even a handful of locomotives loaded, a Java native interface, thank you, Tiger. So if you have 16 milliseconds a frame, and you're taking even a millisecond to do the math for a single piece of, like a single side for the valve gear, if you have 8 standard non-articulated steam locomotives, you're going to be dropping. You can't run at 60 frames a second. So realistically, this sort of system needs to be able to do all of its calculations in 1/10 of a millisecond. That's why it's a hard problem to solve. It's doable. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very hard. And part of the fun with JNI is you have to also have it work via multiple platforms, which I would rather port an existing library and optimize it for Java than use JNI. But yeah, if someone comes to me with a reasonable prototype, I'm all ears. So back to this stuff and not talking about linkages because it's a hard problem. Let's see, what other gauges do we have here? We have, this is effectively the same thing. So the boiler pressure gauge. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Rotation, pin, and thing to rotate. Let's get into some new stuff, because most of you guys have seen this sort of thing before. So this is pretty soon. We've got our headlights. I hacked the K4 together a little bit, which is over here. And I set this to have throttle 1 having the CG of throttle, so control group throttle, and the brake is control group brake. I didn't want to add additional stuff to play with. This was mostly just for the prototyping when I was playing with this. But now I have headlight 1 LCG throttle. So you can't click and drag the throttle around, but when you modify the throttle control group value, it will either turn on or turn off this headlight, which is pretty cool. And this functions for interior lighting as well, and full bright. So these markers are set to full bright, but I've set them to the LCG of brake. So when the brake is on, these... Oh, do they turn off or turn on? I forget. You'll have to play with it. I haven't touched this in a few days, and I don't actually remember if it's on or off in that state. But it should be as simple as that. If you want to... So you could also add multiple lights in different configurations and turn them on or turn them off using LCGs, light control groups, which is pretty cool. That's not in the document. That's something I have to add to the document. That's changed in the past week or so. So we went over all this stuff, scaling, translation. Let's see. Turn objects invisible. Depending on the control group value, yes. So I might do hidden if it's fully on. Technically, you can do that with scale and invert, but I can add something explicitly for that. Has this finished? It finished! Okay. I'll go back to the document. I just want to start opening Immersive Railroading IPR. Hopefully this works. That did not work. Very much did not work. That crashed IntelliJ. Ah, what the hell? Let's try this again. Fingers crossed. Let's close the README. Okay, it worked that time. I have no idea why that crashed. Well, so let's play with adding. Once I finish going over the control document, we can start playing with adding the ability to turn objects visible or invisible. That really shouldn't be that hard. And I still have not merged in the bell code yet. That I need to work on this week. So that handles most of that. Modifiers. Yeah, so each part by default generates a unique control group name based on the object model stuff. But you can, so you can link parts. Like if you've got two doors that open together, you can link them via a control group. And global will apply. So when you modify a widget that has, or any control that has global in it, like that, it will find any other control groups that with the same name in any other linked stock and modify the value. That allows you to do some cool stuff like pantographs controlled from the cab. Animated bells should be in the next test build. I've just been fiddling with other stuff in the meantime, like the light controls. Oh, that direction. I... I... I could technically add a control group that was always set, that was effectively read-only and was only set, and was set to the locomotive speed. That's an interesting thing. I think we can do both. Yeah, let's hop into that in just a minute. Yeah, it gives you the configurability of either doing it via the JSON or doing it in the model itself. It's a little. So I'm trying to think about forward and backwards and how that would be reflected in here. I could do what I could do is I could do a locomotive forward, locomotive backward, locomotive neutral, or not. I mean, a forward, backward, and neutral control group. Would that suffice for what you're thinking, or would you actually need the speed as part of those? Okay. Yeah, that I think we can do. Yeah. Okay. We'll hop back into that in just a minute. I want to finish going over that document, and then we can start digging into that. Global set the CGN on piece of stock. Yes. Toggle. Toggle is like you can effectively move from the the off state to the on state. Every single control group goes from the value 0 to the value 1. 0 being 0% on, and 1 being 100% on. So if I refer to off or on or a certain percentage, that's what I'm talking about. So toggle makes it like it's either on or off. So it either goes 0 or 1 or back and forth. So if you have a door that you just want to like click and have it slide out of the way, you can do that. It's especially useful for toggle buttons. There's also the ability to do press buttons. These are useful for like the horn. So like if you add a horn that you want to be active when the player is pressing the button, that's what that would be for. You can do other cool stuff with that as well, but that was what I had in mind. And label I kind of went over. Yeah. Doors external as soon as you walk through the bounding box of, or as soon as you're walking through the bounding box of an external door, it will then try and dismount you if it's at least 75% open. And connecting is something that I need to talk about. Connecting doors, people have been having trouble, but you need to fix your internal passenger area. So the internal passenger area needs to end within a half meter of the connecting door. So if you have a internal bounding box that's too big or too small, it won't register the connecting door correctly. And I might fiddle with that in the future, but that's the best system I could come up with at the time. And all other doors are cosmetic for now. And sounds. This stuff is cool, and there are some examples that people have posted in some of the other chats. But it's pretty cool. So you have an engage, disengage, and move sounds. And if you specify a move percent, every time you move that percentage, it's like if you move the reverser 10%, you'd have it make a clicking noise, for example, which is kind of cool. One thing that I do that's probably wrong that Mizco has pointed out, and please correct me if I'm saying your handle wrong, is that it actually stops the engage sound when you release. So if you have a button, the engage sound does not work correctly. The disengage sound does, but the engage one does not. So I've got to fiddle with that. And here, so yeah, linear brake control and linked brake control. Linear brake control is like the old style of brakes. So if we look at here, this train brake, when you move it in the forward direction, or toward the front, it increases the brake. When you pull it backwards, it reduces the brake. But it always resets back to the center. Yeah. Sorry, Sebastian said something on the side and I got distracted. But the old style of brakes was really just as, like, I mean, not old, but like old in history, but like old in the way that IR worked is the brakes would start at 0 and go all the way to 1. And that's how the control would work. So if you wanted a slider on the dash of your diesel to go from 0 to 1 to turn the brakes on or off, you would want the linear brake control, so it wouldn't snap back to the center point. So that's what that's for. The linked brake control is if you're using a throttle brake part in your locomotive where you've got the throttle and the brake on the same lever, you can do the same thing with the keypad. So depending on how you move the throttle, so increasing the throttle increases the throttle, decreasing the throttle decreases the throttle to the point where it's in neutral, but past neutral, it starts engaging the brake, which is pretty cool. This only works correctly if you have enabled the reverser logic, which I think at some point may become a default. I'll probably do a community poll within the next few weeks about that. So I'd recommend setting this if you use the throttle brake component for modern diesel-electric locomotives, or electric locomotives, in your models. But experiment with them, see how they work. Yeah, gauges we went over. Lighting. I think I've covered most of this either in this in previous streams. The new thing is the LCG light control group. Set texture, cast lights, reverse. Yeah. So I'm curious to see what other modelers come up with for different light flare textures. Because the default one I made in GIMP in about 5 minutes, the GNU image manipulation program, or GTK, I forget that. The G stands for either GNU or GTK, I always forget. Or GNOME? Maybe it stands for GNOME. Anyways, other light flares would be cool. Or if you come up with one that's better than in the base mod, post it in the modeling chat and give me a ping, and I'll definitely consider dropping that in instead of the sort of work in progress one I've put in there for now. Yeah. Also, something worth mentioning is if you have a bunch of lights on the front of your locomotive, I'd recommend setting cast lights to false for all but one of them. Just because the more light sources that Optifine has, the slower it goes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was GNU. I remember there was some weird thing with GNOME or GTK in there as well at some point, but yeah. Yeah, it is the GNU image GNU image manipulation program. It's a little bit of a mouthful. Okay. Immersive, yeah, anything with full bright in the name is rendered as like super bright, and with shaders is set up to glow. And anything that has interior will be softly lit at night. And if you have a door, it's recommended to make a two-part door where the external does not have interior in the name, and the internal has interior in the name, and the external part doesn't have interior in the name. And yeah, take a look at some of these models in the base mod. You can navigate to them just via GitHub in main resources models. Here. The BRO1 I actually need to pull into master and clean up. That is something that I need to do. Interior lighting to be a little bit brighter. Yeah, configure option in the JSON is definitely doable there. We will do the the control group stuff you were talking about and the hiding stuff you were talking about. And then maybe we can hop into adding that to the JSON. But now that this is functional, theoretically, we gotta add the configuration, Java 1.8. That's all set. Package mode. There we go. Okay. So we're going to do the simple thing first so I can warm up a little bit. So we're going to add the, I guess we can just call it hide, the hide flag to the model control. I should probably make this a generic function, but copy paste is pretty easy. And this is really simple code. So invert. Okay, question for chat. Would you prefer hide or hidden? I think I'm leaning toward hide. Well, I don't know. Hide implies that when the control goes to 1 or turns on, then it would hide it. Hidden implies that it's hidden by default. Okay. So would you rather it start like hide when it's 1 or hide when it's hide when it's on or hide when it's off? Yeah, that's true. It is in line with other names. And again, the invert flag will allow you to have whatever functionality you want. I'm just trying to decide what the default is. I just might clean up this code while I'm in here just for fun. So render. Okay, so here, but we also need, I guess we can do it here. If, we gotta get value of stock first. Hide when it's on. Okay. Let's just say equal to 1. I think that should work. Yeah, because buttons will set to 1, which is hopefully what's right. Okay. So if hide is enabled and the value is equal to 1, so any other value is fine, but as soon as like the button's toggled on or the lever's fully engaged, okay, 0 showing, 1 hiding. Okay, 2 votes for that. We're good. We're going to return. So we're actually going to skip rendering in that case. And I also need to do the same thing for the light control group, or for lights, which are light flare. I don't think I need to do that. I don't know if you guys can hear the ripping in the background, but one of my cats is just destroying a newspaper, which honestly isn't that bad. It's easy enough to clean up. Oops. Okay. Again, I need to make a function out of this so that I don't copy and paste this, but it's really, really simple code, so I'm not too worried about it. That would be Henry, who has now gone to take a nap. James is considering joining him. I had to take more cat pictures. They're lovely little munchkins. Okay, so, is light off? This is where we can do it. Oh, actually, this you should just use the LCG for. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. I don't actually want to do this here. That is true. Oh, hi. Hi, James. How you doing, little muffin? maybe I can set a goal on Patreon for adding a face/cat cam. So let's see. So light flares, I think, so right now you can enable or disable them via LCGs, and I think I want to add invert here as well. Yeah, I think I need to. So the way it's currently set up, it's not ideal. So we are still going to do something like this. Component. Okay, so where do we use control group? Here. Equals. Okay. So that will allow you to specify, to invert the light on or off control. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this will allow you to turn on and off lights more dynamically and allow you to hide components. Which you could technically do with scale, but this is definitely a cleaner solution and more efficient. And goodness, James, you're drooling all over me. He drools a lot. Like in a sweet way? I don't know. He does pushies and yeah, he's a good boy. Okay, so that's that piece. Let me commit these changes. Just double check what I'm doing. Actually, first I'm going to commit the BR01 changes. Or, let's check this. So I added hide here. Added that. Added invert. Okay, that looks good. Which defaults to that. Lights and controls. Ouch. Okay, James, you're gonna have to hop off in a sec. Okay, back to suggestions. And I gotta get. Sorry, James. I will give you snuggles later. There you go. Okay, so there was the, oh yeah, control group direction. Let's do that next, and then maybe the config option for how bright the interior light is. Okay. So that's actually going to be an entity rolling stock, funnily enough. Entity rolling stock. Here we are going to do that. Okay. I guess we want to do this client side. Yeah, we only want this control group client side. If client side, then we want to get velocity, right? I do. Let's look at how we do the speed gauge, which is going to be in locomotive model, I believe. Yes. Gauge speed. Stock, get currents. Oh, okay, actually this is going to be an entity movable rolling stock, not actually over here. Because that's what has the get current speed function. Do I want to do this? I should probably do the server side. And then let it sync. That's probably the, well... Not, I guess we can try a client side and I can always fiddle with that. And to answer your question, Sebastian, the brightness config for Fulbright, unfortunately, that would that doesn't really work with the way that emissive stuff is set up in Minecraft. Sorry. Well, yeah. Yeah, okay, back to what I was working on. Okay. Entity movable. I should be able to do this client side. Yeah. That's a bug. And yes, I can do this client side. First, we're going to fix a bug. So, Sebastian, what you can do is you can have... you could technically... yeah, you could have one component named internal and one component named Fulbright and switch them via control groups. Yeah, so... I guess right now, if you move a train backwards, I don't think it breaks blocks. Which would explain some of the weird stuff I've seen. Let's take a look for other potential places where that's the case. Just... done. Most places we're doing absolute value are looking to see if it's 0. Yeah, absolute value, absolute value. Yeah, absolute value. But if I could find lines that didn't contain absolute... I mean, I can. I have grep. Okay, so dead man switch is 0, as I just want to do. Okay, tractive effort, yes, that should be aware of what sign that is. That slip coefficient, yes. Get current speed, yes. Oh. Backwards trains might do negative damage. How about that? So it checks against 0, sim speed, simulation speed stuff, scaling that. I don't see... oh, okay, actually, you know what would happen is this whole block was skipped because I wasn't absolute valuing that. Alright, let's... I mean, I can take a quick look into the code. Come on. Attack entity from is the function. That's the value. No, that's not a... guess it's, yeah, it is attack entity from. Entity living is probably where we care about that. Yes. That's true. I can just poke through the code real quick and see. Damage entity. That's what we care about. And yes, we can test it. I can boot up Minecraft and play that. Oh, no. So, okay, that won't work. There is a check to make sure it's greater than 0. So it technically wouldn't have healed an entity, but it would definitely is not correct code. Yeah, so speed damage is now calculated correctly. But that whole block wasn't hit due to other bugs. Sim speed. That's that thing. Back talking to cats. I mean, if you wanted to make, like, I could add it as a feature so that if you hit an entity backwards, it would heal it, but maybe an Easter egg someday. Maybe set that as like a $500 patron goal or something. If I can hit like a certain level, I can add Easter eggs like that. Okay. Reverses. Yes. Okay. Double distance travel. Okay, that's fine. So, double check the changes. Goodness, that is embarrassing. Anyways, back to the regularly scheduled program. Alright, entity movable rolling stock. Here we go. Get current speed. So we want to do... We'll just do a couple so we can set... Control position, and I actually need to add a function for this. Oh dear, you're gonna knock over your whole fort, aren't you? Cats are they're being cats in the background. Let's see, string comes second, so this will be a string, this will be the main one. Okay. And they just knocked over the fort. Good God, good job, guys. I think this is going to be false, because this should only be ever used in this very particular scenario. No. No! You can't have your cake and hit it too. What you could do is have that connected to the reverser position. So you could have the LCG hooked up to the reverser. That's what you can do. Sorry, I'm responding to Sebastian in the chat. And this is going to be movement forward, or moving. Greater than 0, and 1, or 0. Or whatever, Minecraft. That's the one that doesn't do conversion? Yes. Reversers have neutral positions. You can use the reverser neutral. LCG reverser. Does it bother anyone else that forward and backward have different number of letters? I'm tempted to call it forward, which is technically probably close to the original spelling back when it was being developed. But just having like this sort of stuff line up just makes life better. Anyways. And I want to invert this condition. Is less than 0 or equal to 0. Not moving. Okay. So, chat, what do you guys think of this? Moving forward, not moving, or moving backwards? Or moving backward? Oh, actually, underscores don't work here. Not moving. There we go. Yeah, I also usually add a space so it lines up. But I think adding this in the middle to break up the visual difference fixes it a little bit for my eyes. Okay, moving forward, not moving. I kind of would call that moving not, or whatever. Forward moving? I don't know. Good enough. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, this will be a little bit of a longer stream today. Moving a little bit slower than usual. Okay. Any objections from chat on these names? Let's see. Going once. Yeah. Okay. Sebastian's saying maybe a little bit shorter. I'd rather have them be long and explicit. Yeah. Yeah, so if your reverser is in neutral but you're still moving forward will be turned on. If you want to have it based on your reverser position of if you're trying to go forward or trying to go backwards, then you should be able to hook it up to the reverser. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Though I'm thinking about the reverser, and the reverser is only technically 0 to 1. So I don't know if you can do neutral with that. I think I can't have a neutral position, right? Okay, you're right. Let me add this, and then we'll come back to that in a sec. Yeah. Currently you can detect forward or reverse, but not neutral. I can add another control state for that. Yeah. Okay. Alright, I did modify that. Oh, so Sebastian, so the lights on that, so if you use LCG, that does not actuate. So LCG can't modify the control group. It only reads the value on it. And if you want to hook into the reverser, you can use the gauge as well, which is an option. That's why I added the gauges. So you couldn't like drag like the needle on a gauge to like modify the throttle position or something like that. Okay, locomotive. Yeah, gauges should work for that. Okay, so that would be funny. Okay, sorry. Anti-movable rolling stock. I just added this code. I think I want to do the same thing for the reverser. Yeah, that makes sense, I think. Drag, on click, on tick. That should be fine. Just want to double check this code real quick. Does that return at the end of this? It does not, okay. Just wanted to check the control flow of the block I added here. That is not the right button. There we go. Okay. Going back to locomotive. Right. There we go. That should work. Yeah, yeah, that should work. So I think that's good to add. Let me double check there's any additional code here. Okay. I think all the other controls are... Oh, actually, yes, that does work. Okay, so I'll start pushing those up, and I'll push I'll send the patrons a link to this after this stream and put this out as a test build at some point this week once a few more tweaks have gone in. Okay, so that's everything we've talked about so far. There was one other suggestion. So locomotive's getting the flickering effect. Maybe at some point. Let's see. Hopefully that is still working. Let me just move stuff around. I accidentally hit the back arrow on my mouse. Yes, okay, that's still working. Okay. Going back to other stuff. Oh, the brightness config. Yes. For internal. Let's take a look at that. Immersive railroading. How do I do that currently? That would be in part. No. This is in the component renderer, which should technically be in that package, but close enough. This is where a lot of the magic happens efficiency-wise, And this is, I kind of glossed over this earlier, but this is what potentially fixes some mod conflicts. If a bunch of other mods do injections and push a bunch of matrices before IR actually renders its stuff, it can run into issues. So this kind of coalesces all of the rotation, translation, scale operations and renders them all at once for a given set of components, which is pretty cool. I also realized I just forgot to add the LCG invert to here. So we're going to do that first. Let's close other tabs. Reopen up light flare. Oh, that's funky. Like, this does need to be added, but I worry about efficiency here. Yeah. It shouldn't be that bad. I can do it once we've already found the LCG. Let's see. What? Invert. Yeah. We'll give it a try. I'll double check later to make sure this isn't super performance intensive. This is really just going to be a single thing. It's not going to be for each. It's just going to be for an individual group. Should be able to rename that to group. Yep. Okay. Okay. I need to add an additional one of these. Okay, so the invert should now work in all of the cases. Okay. Yeah, this code's a little bit funkiness, but it works pretty well. And it's efficient, that's the big thing. Okay. So that works. Does that. Okay. Back to the light levels. So this is either full bright or no up. This is where we apply interior normal. Interior light. That is where this changes. So interior light is set. So that's with bright groups, with interior light. Okay, so here we could actually get the so right now I set that to 6 out of 15. So that could be the default. So get the stocks definition. The definition is the JSON with the model attached. What do we want to call this value? This is controlling, I guess this is interior. Yeah, interior light level. And this should actually be return. Create a local variable. No. Field. And I'll move stuff around in a sec. Okay, properties. Here we go. I'll do level equals properties dot call it that to match the casing. If it has that, then we do just a get of call that float, or the default, which is what's currently there. And I want to move this up to here, just for cleanliness, and move this down to here to all the other getters. Check that. So if it has interior light level, use the value that's provided, otherwise default to that. Cool. It's actually reasonably straightforward. And the component renderer, yeah. Okay. I think that should work. Yeah. That's pretty straightforward. I just had an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I think it's a good idea. Could I control the intensity? I could, but that would make it very, very slow. Yes, because the LCG would have to be applied, and this would be called a bunch more times. Yeah, I'm not going to do that because performance-wise that doesn't make sense. So, cool. That's everything that I think we've brought up so far. Let's see, do you guys have any other questions on this stuff? Holy cow, it's already 7 o'clock. I need to eat dinner. But I've had fun with you guys, hopping back and forth on some of these ideas and prototyping this in real time. Let's see, I don't think there's anything else in the control document other than updating the control document. Let's see, let me pull up, I sent a message for what I wanted to do. So I've merged all this stuff together. There's one other thing I put in Discord that I wanted to bring up. Right. So yeah, I still need to so I did a little bit of Googling with the permission system. That is happening this week. I can't put that off any longer. I've got everything's merged into master. So everything's kind of hooked up together, which means we can now do the controlled lighting. And yeah, I've got to work on the cab car and independent brake stuff again, which does mean that the independent brake gauge and independent brake stuff will probably go in it sooner rather than later. Meaning of life. Well, you also asked about kitten life. Kitten life is to do whatever comes naturally, which is usually sleep or play. There's really not that much in between, which isn't bad. The meaning of life, if you have cats, is to, I mean, you're effectively, I mean, you don't have cats, cats have you. So, make of that what you will. Let's see. Multi-deck support. I know, it's going to be a pain in the rear. I'll probably add multi-deck support at the same time I add seats, because it's well, I might add seats first. It's slightly less annoying, but ugh. It's funky. I was actually thinking about seats today. I might put seats on the board after the next release, which hopefully I can get the permission stuff done in the next 2 weeks. Get a prototype out by this weekend and get things. Excuse me. Get things cleaned up enough for a release. I still have to talk to Legend about taking some of the other models, about taking some time to update some of the existing models to have control support, but I just want to have a few pieces of stock in that support that and then slowly expand it over time. It does not need to be completely perfect for the first iteration. I mostly want to get it out there so that people's packs start working that are really diving into some of this stuff. And yeah, it's been, I guess, as a wrap-up, I've been doing this for a month and a half now. I need to stream a little bit more consistently, and I apologize for my patrons for doing this a little bit more off the cuff than initially planned. I'll work on that, but I've been pretty happy with the amount that I've been able to get done on the week-to-week basis, and I'm having fun with this. As fall sets in, I've got some other stuff that I want to work on. Just want to go to get up. And I'll probably take a break from immersive railroading here or there, not like a month, but like a week or two at a time to work on some other stuff. But I'll keep you guys posted. I've appreciated the support that I've gotten so far, and it's really made all this possible. It's given me enough peace of mind to put off looking for a job for at least a little while, which is awesome. Let's see, multi-decks. Yeah. Yeah, Sebastian, I know. Double deck support. And eventually walkable meshes. But I guess I'll wait for you to finish typing. So this is, if you're curious what this has looked like, this is the actual, this is how much I've been working on immersive railroading and universal mod core over time. It's been pretty busy. It's pretty good. Tinted windows. Minecraft really doesn't like to do tinting. I don't think the overhead is, the performance overhead and added code complexity is worth the additional stuff. Yes, it's effectively what I'm doing for the headlights, and they're still buggy in a lot of situations that I'm not happy about. Like for example, any tile entities will render in front of the lights, which is a problem. No, it's just render. Minecraft is not designed for tinting. It's a fundamental problem with the game. It's not designed for tinting. They've made some interesting render choices along the way. Not choices I would have made, but it's the system we have to live with for today. So let's see. Before I sign off for the night, let me take a quick look at the patron voting stuff. Turntables are getting a lot of votes, so I think that's definitely on the list for the 111 release. So these two, or this one, I think is close to done, if not wrapping up. This one isn't going to be that hard. It's just going to be a pain, so I'm going to just kind of hack at that over the next week or two and get some test builds out with that built in, and work with the folks who are supporting that. Reverser and so much more is in. Doors and animated parts and so much more. That's in a really good state. Probably a couple more minor tweaks before the release, but I'm I'm happy with that. Let's see, and more particles for steam locomotives and blowdowns. I want to revisit a lot of the boiler mechanics, and I think that's when I'd like to add that. I may add some more ahead of that, but it depends on when that work comes in. Locomotive and car sway, yeah, that would be fun. Dynamic cargo visualizations, I think that performance-wise that'll be interesting, and I'll probably have a config option to turn that on and off, but I think that could be pretty cool. And then, yeah, getting into some of the other stuff. I'll have to take a look to see if there's a issue for seats. Excuse me. There probably is at this point. I think I'd be willing to add that to the list once, like after the next release. Same thing. There's another one in here that I gotta come back to as well. That I gotta add to the list. The show current load option seems broken. Okay, Sebastian, we can work on that this week and take a look through. I did make some changes to the render system, so that's entirely possible that I might have borked that. But we can play with that. Alright, I think I'm going to wrap up for the night. I will, tomorrow morning, put out a poll with potential times that we can take a look at for the next Patreon live stream. Thanks again, everyone who participated, and I'm looking forward to all the comments that you guys have in Discord and YouTube chat. I do try to read them all. So I will see you all next week, and we'll hopefully have a new test build or a new patron build available within the next day or so. Thanks again for participating, and hope to see you in the next one. That was